Okay, now that comes the animation part, but before we begin to animate, let's just make sure that we give the graphic operators or trio operators the ability to swap out this text. So again, we need to go into our built-ins, our container plugins, and we're going to go into the control folder. I'm going to drag my control text onto the headline here. I'm going to click on the control text, and we're going to keep the field identifier at 1, the description at headline, and the settings at the default. We're going to do the same thing for the subline, add the control text to it. We're going to make the field identifier 2, and the description subline is fine. We're going to leave all those as the default. The last thing that we need is the full screen text, and we're going to add our control text on here. If you want to rename this container to, you can, full screen text. We'll go into our control text icon. We're going to make this field identifier 3, and since we didn't have that container named before we drug that on there, it picked up the old name. So let's just change the description here to full screen text. Now we got it all set up for Trio, and notice our control object was dropped on there automatically whenever we added these control text plugins that got added. To begin animating this, we can start basically wherever. I'm going to start with the background, so I'm going to turn my headline banners off, and we're going to do something a little bit different that we didn't do in the previous tutorials, in that we're going to make this background loop. So to animate the background, I'm going to first start with this one, and we're just going to click on the image here, and we're going to animate the image. So I'm just going to play with the position here a little bit to see where our lines are, and I'm just going to scale it up a little bit to give us a little bit of room to move. So you can see as I move this left, there's a hard break here in the line. I don't want to see that, so I'm just going to line it to the left of the screen there, roughly right about there. I'm going to hit set key, and then I'm just going to move this over somewhere to the right a little bit and give it a little subtle motion. So I'm going to hit set key again right there. I'm going to do the same thing for this other texture on our other rectangle. Instead of moving it on the X position, I'll just do it on the Y. So 120, we can start right there. I'll set a keyframe. Let's say I rewind this, and let's just move this down, not on the Y, but maybe on the X instead. So we'll do something like that, a little subtle movement, and we'll hit set key. I have an animation on 2 of these. Let's click on them and actually loop these. So if I come back and play, I just want to make sure that everything looks okay. All right, good enough. First, it was a little fast, so I'm just going to slow these down. So I'm going to drag these keyframes way out. So I'm going to zoom out on my timeline, and let's make it around 10 seconds, and we'll do the same thing for this rectangle. I can drag it by the keyframes, or I can grab it by this pink bar here, and that will grab both of them out at the same time. Let's offset them a little bit so they don't actually start to swing at the same time. Now I want to loop these, so in order to get the loop, if I click anywhere between the 2 keyframes, it brings up this box in the upper right of the stage. I'm going to go ahead and click on loop out, and also click on the swing out. I'm going to set the infinity button so it will loop forever. Here we get these lines which tell us that this is now a looping and swinging animation. I'm going to do the same thing for this texture. So I'm going to click anywhere between the 2 keyframes. It brings up this loop and swing box. I'm going to turn these buttons on, turn on the infinity, and I'm also going to do it for the same for the position Y, turn these 2 buttons on, and the infinity. So if I just kind of start the animation from here, you'll see what happens. As it reaches that point, it's going to just kind of slowly start going back the other way. Now these are still going a little bit too fast, so I'm just going to slide these down some more, and that will kind of slow up the animation. So let's have this one a little bit slower, and you can see how that really slowed down the animations. Now they're all fine. What I do want it to do is to rename this default director. So I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to say rename, and I'm going to call this director loop. I'm going to close that off and kind of forget about it. I'm going to create a new director here, and I'll just leave it as the default name for now. And this new director is where we're going to place all of our other animations. So we're going to start animating these other things one by one here and throw them in that director. So let's turn on this container. We have a lot of containers here to animate. So I'm just going to start by going through each one of these and doing them one by one. The first container here, back plates, we have 2 Nagis, so I'm just going to randomly animate these. This first green one, let's say I just want it to kind of come in and land right here, so I'm just going to place my timeline at 15. I'm going to set a key. I'm going to rewind my timeline, and I'm going to move this right and have it come in from the right. I'm going to hit set key. Now we get an animation. Before I go any further, I want to make sure it went into the right director, so I'm going to click on this spoked wheel. It takes this, and you see that it added this Nagi in our new director and not the loop. So that's what I want. So I'm going to go back and just double check that most of my animations do go in that director. So I'm going to animate this other black Nagi on here. And this time, let's say we want it to come in from the other side. So I'm just going to advance my timeline to 20. I'm going to set a keyframe. Let's rewind that. And then I'm just going to have this slide in from the left side. I'm going to hit set key. I'm going to hit play. And you can see how that comes in. Now, what I didn't do is actually have these 2 backplates animate in, so I'm going to do that as well, but I just wanted to be cautious because I don't want them to go into the loop director. So if it's easier for you, you can regroup these and call these a different thing and actually animate these groups on. Since we already have an animation on this group, I'm just going to add it onto a container. So I'm just going to have this backplate scale in. So let's say at 15 I want this to land. I'm going to set my axis center point here to a right and top. I'm going to set key. I'm going to rewind, and then we're just going to scale that. So it's going to scale in from the top right. I'm going to hit set key, and I'm going to do the same thing for this rectangle. I'm going to group it. I'm going to select this group. Let's call this BG2. So right around here, let's say I want it to land. I'm going to set a keyframe, rewind it, and I'm just going to move the position off to the left there. I'm going to hit set key. Now I just want to make sure these animations went in the right thing too and not in the loop director. So if I click on this BG1 animation, you can see that it's inside of this loop, which I do not want. So I'm going to take this animation and drag it into my new director. I'm going to do the same thing for BG2, take it out of the loop director and into the new director. So when I click play on this director, everything comes in together. Now that I have multiple directors, this button here becomes not only active but important. So now we have 2 directors that we can choose to play. Here I can choose to play the loop or the main director. If I play the main director, it animates that in. If I hit the loop and hit play, it's just going to play the looping animation. If I want them to play together, I can just hit this all, and then they will play together all the time. So I'm going to close this box. I have all set. I'm going to turn this button off right there, and now it should always be playing everything together. All right, so we have them. Let's go down to our headline here. We're going to animate this on. So since 2 of these are in a group, I have it stroked and a white panel. I'm just going to animate the group. So I'm going to click on the group here. I'm going to set my axis center to right. I'm going to set the axis center Y here to top. If you need your bounding box on, you can turn that on and it shows you where it is. So let's have this animate on, and when it gets to about 25, this is where I want it to land. I'm going to set a key. I'm going to rewind this timeline, and we're going to scale that group down. So it's going to grow on like that. We'll hit set key, and we have an animation for that as well. Let's move down to our subline. We'll have this animate on. So again, we have this in a group. It's a texture with a stroked line. Rather than doing these individually, since I do have a group, I'll just animate the group. So the axis center, I'll set to left, and I'll set the axis center Y to top. And again, turn your bounding box on, you can see where it lands. So I'm going to have it scale up this way. So we'll just set our timeline where we want it to land. I'll rewind the timeline, and we'll scale it. You can see how that is scaling up from the top left. If we hit play, we can see how everything scales up together. And you'll notice this little pop here. This is a Z position, so you just want to be aware that all your Z positions are set correctly. So if they're not, just go back and you can move one of them back or move one of them up if need be. Let's move down to our text plate. So we want this to animate on. And again, since they are in a group, we can have that animate on however we want. Rather than doing them individually, I'm just going to do the group again. We can choose however we want. I'm going to set it from the right and from the top. So it's going to land right around here. We'll set a key. I'm going to rewind my timeline. We're going to scale that down, have it grow from the top left. We hit play, and there that grows. Here's our logo. So let's slide this in as well. It's going to land right there where it is at 46. We'll rewind it and just have it come in from the left. We hit set key, and there our logo flies in. Let's come down to this little design parameter that we made. We can have this again fly in. We'll just keep it simple and have it fly in from the left. So I'll set a keyframe right there, rewind the timeline a little bit, and adjust the position of that design element to the left. So we'll hit set key, we hit play. Here you can see that little design element fly in. Now we have our text to animate yet. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my headline text, and let's go back into our built-ins, into our text effects. We're going to use the text effects scale again. So let's drag this onto our text. Right around 50 or 55, this is where we want our text to land. So if I go into my TFX scale, our progress percentage, I'm going to set that at 100%. I'm going to hit set key. I'm going to rewind our timeline, and we're going to decrease our progress percentage down to 0 and hit set key. So it grows on from left to right. Again, you can change it however you want. If you want to go opposite or to the center or from the center out, you can choose whichever you want there. To cheat a little bit, since I already have the TFX scale set and the animation set on that, I'm just going to drag that plugin down onto my sub headline. And rather than set the direction from normal like the other one, we're going to set it to opposite. Now we have our full screen text yet that we need to animate on, and again I'm just going to use the TFX scale by copying it down. It takes that animation with it, and we're going to change that one to normal as well. So to test this out, let's fill in some text here. So I'm just going to type in some random text, and it's going to auto wrap wherever I put a space. So let's fill it into the very end here, and let's see how that plays out when we hit play. So I hit play, and it came on a little bit too quick, so I'm going to go in and adjust the animation. So I click on the animation here. Let's zoom into our timeline. This keyframe I just want to move down a little bit. Maybe for the other text ones too, I'll do the same. Maybe let's stagger them just a tiny bit so there's a little bit of a difference. And when I hit play again, you can see how they all animate on a little bit different. Now we need to set our stop points. So while we're in the stage here, we're going to do that. So here everything lands right around here. Everything is on. So this is where I want to put the stop point. I don't want the stop point on the loop because I want this loop director to constantly loop. So the only two things I should have in my loop director are my two rectangle textures. And if I open my rectangle animations here, it says texture position X, texture position X, and texture position Y. So that's how I know that the texture, this headline and subline, this should be in my other director. So I'm going to go ahead and drag them down in there too. Here's our director that we want the stop point on. So I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to place the timeline bar wherever I want it to stop. Our stop point is active. I'm going to go ahead and click that. It adds the stop point here. Now we just need to make the out animations. And to save time again, what I'll do is just kind of click on these and copy and drag each one of these out. Now you may want to pay a little bit more attention to how yours actually animate out and stuff like that, but for time reasons I'm just going to do this very quickly here so we can progress on with the other tutorials. So I'm just going to simply keep copying these, something like this, and like I said, not paying too much attention to the exact speed or anything. I know I can always go back and tweak these later if need be. To copy these again, I am just holding down the C, I'm selecting a keyframe, clicking and dragging it. And that's how you copy keyframes. So last one here, let's just drag this out. We hit play. The full screen comes in, it stops, but you notice the background is still moving here. So if we take a look at this, it's a stage and we rewind everything. What you'll notice here, we hit play. Okay, one bar stops, but this bar keeps going in the loop director. So our background is looping, but nothing else is. Now when we hit continue, everything is going to fly out. So your scene is set up, it's pretty much ready to be tested in Trio. Before we do that, we have one more scene that we need to design and set up. So we'll move on to the next scene.